May the words that I speak and the thoughts and the wonderings of all of our hearts draw us closer to God, who is our rock and our Redeemer. This sermon I have to bring you from Good Friday to Easter Sunday. And isn't that always the task? How do we bring our story that we want to see through Good Friday's eyes and reshape it in the image of Easter Sunday? In other words, how do we become the resurrection? So yesterday was the Trans Day of Remembrance, which is the day that happens every year in which we remember and light candles for all those people who were killed during the past year because of their gender identity. And there were over 400 around the world this year. It has been increasing rapidly, which might be good news because it might be more is getting reported. It might be bad news because there's more of this violence. But the reason why I bring this up is I think it's something that this is the kind of thing that has to stand beside Christ the King Sunday. That's the traditional name for this Sunday, is Christ the King. We call it Reign of Christ because of recognizing how much Christ's kingdom is not of this world. Christ's dream does not fit with the dream of the empire. Christ's dream is not Pilate's dream. In the scripture, it's Pilate's wife's dream, but Jesus Christ Superstars changed the canon on us. This is our challenge. What kind of king is Jesus? Who is his kingdom? And I want to say, and maybe this is too far, and maybe this will get me in trouble, but maybe this will just resonate the truth. And maybe it's both of them at the same time. The people who were killed, those 400 names, they record them from October 1st to September 30th for the given year, and they start at the beginning. I got about as far as mid-August before it was too much and I couldn't read anymore, but I scanned through after that. The people who were killed. So where I'm seeing these people who were killed violently, by and large, talking about torture, definitely talking about being shot. So very violent deaths. The people who were killed were by and large trans women of color. Okay? And so that means that they are women, people who have transitioned to being women. So they're vulnerable because they're women. They're vulnerable because people don't understand what it means that they are women when they have transitioned. And our society does not deal well with men who don't act like men. So they're women, they're trans, and they are racialized. That's a newer word that we use to say that race is more, it's an idea. It's not really a biological thing, it's an idea that we've all have and share together. So this brings up a topic called intersectionality. Big word. Intersectionality, that means that we have all these identities together. You're a mother, you're a grandmother, you're a grandfather, you're a farmer, you're Canadian, you're rural, You cheer for the Rough Riders. Am I allowed to say that, or that one gonna get me thrown out? We have all these different identities at once. And when you have an identity that is outside the middle, I'm going to unpack that a little bit in a couple minutes, but an identity that's outside the middle, it's on the margins. See, that's where Jesus is at the margins and at the intersectional margins. So you're in one margin and then you have another margin, so it puts you even further out. That is where Jesus' kingdom lies. So was thinking about this and trying to think about ways to talk about it that would make sense in our lives, because it's a bit of a hard concept for some of us to understand. But I think I might have thought of a way. Because we can all remember being a teenager. As in, at some point in your life, you were between 13 and 19 years old, and I'm assuming that you remember that. Now, imagine being the only teenager in a room full of adults. How that feels. You may well have been hyper aware that you're different, aware that everybody else has things in common that are different for you. And then, okay, so this is 2021 and this is gonna hurt, okay, but I need to say it. And then somebody says, everyone remembers where they were when 9/11 happened. In a group of teenagers today, or if there's a teenager in the room and I say that, what have I done? I'm sorry to remind you of this, but today's teenagers weren't alive in 2001. I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry but there are adults in the world now, adults, full-on adults with jobs and kids and lives who were not alive in 2001. Okay, so if I put it another way, you imagine that you're a teenager and somebody says, everyone remembers where they were when the stock market crashed in 1929. No, you don't. Everyone remembers when the soldiers came home from the war. You know, and depending on how old you are, it's what age. But have you had the experience of having somebody say, everyone knows their experience when this happened and you weren't born yet? I'm seeing some heads nodding. Maybe people never talked like that back in the 40s, I don't know. Okay, so that is marginalizing someone, pretending that they're not there. See, who is at the center? What do we assume is the average, normal person? You say, just imagine a generic person. And typically, you're likely to think of a 40 to 50-year-old white man. There's nothing wrong with being a 40 to 50-year-old white man, but a lot of people aren't 40 to 50 years old, aren't white, and aren't men. Like, think about if you say, imagine a doctor. Now, of course, we live in a community where there's specific people who are doctors, so maybe you imagine a hijabi woman with a young family. Or maybe you imagine a white woman with a middle family. Maybe you imagine an older white man or a black man, and they're all doctors. But when do people put a modifier on it? People will say the lady doctor, it's called a microaggression. It's like saying that she is less of a doctor because she's a lady. I've never heard anyone say the gentleman doctor. You notice that? Those are, because being a male doctor, that's just normal. And that's totally separate then from, say, a proctologist, who can be any gender. Just, See, there's a doctor for women, a doctor of women. People will come to the church and ask to speak to the senior pastor. I was in team, my teammate and I, and we were equal, and neither one of us was senior. She's older than me, so that made her kind of senior. But every month we'd switch off and do the services at the care facilities. Service at care facilities today, by the way, don't let me forget to tell you. So she would be the senior pastor the month she was going to the seniors' home, and she could deal with anyone who wanted to talk to the senior pastor because they were not normally good news. Again, that when you imagine the minister and the lady minister, the black lady minister, or the black minister, you would never say when they're white, but you have to qualify it when they're black or Chinese, or that's what I'm talking about. Those who are away from the center. And the more different things you have that put you on the outside, the harder it can be for you. It's really hard when you're disabled, when your body won't let you do what you want to do, whether from injury or illness. And many amongst us have had a season of that, and some a lifetime, when your body doesn't work the way you want. It is harder if you are disabled and you are also a senior. It makes your life more difficult. There are barriers that are put up for you that aren't there for other people. When people talk about a normal person, they assume somebody who's 40 and you're not, so you don't quite fit in. And when you start to add these on, it pushes to the outside. And that's what brings me towards Trans Day of Remembrance. So here we have the majority of the people being remembered are transgender women of color. And a large number of them, not all of them by far, definitely not all of them by far, but quite a few of them fell into at least two categories that aren't mutually exclusive. A lot of them were sex workers. Now, how does Jesus interact with sex workers? You know the Bible, you've heard the stories. You know that Jesus got in trouble with the authorities because he spent time with sex workers. Sometimes we use different language, but the current language that we use that tries to destigmatize, to try to pull back the margins. So when you imagine that, when you imagine a person in that position, and you see, to understand Jesus' kingdom, it's about people. It's about everybody, which means that we pull to the center the people who are on the outside. The further to the outside you are, the more we pull you into the center. That is the kind of kingdom that Jesus has in mind. And it doesn't sit well with Pilate. Pilate doesn't care that Jesus is feeding the multitudes and healing the sick. He's great. He's doing good stuff. Isn't that nice? Pilate has nothing to object to there. Pilate doesn't care if he washes his hands properly or observes the Jewish Sabbaths properly by whoever says that. Pilate doesn't care about that. But Jesus is challenging the fundamental order of society. The idea that some people are more important than others. The idea that the kind of person we should all try to be is Pilate. Think about it. Everybody should strive to be like Pilate. That's the ultimate goal. And anything about you that is different from Pilate, you try to minimize and push away and get out of yourself. Pilate is powerful. Pilate is well-liked and well-received. In general, some people hate him because he's powerful, but he is the pinnacle of power in Roman Palestine. And Jesus says, my kingdom isn't like that. In my kingdom, we don't care about, when Jesus says all of this in the translation, we're in Pilate. I'm not talking all of this sanctuary. Take our imagination. We are in the opulence of Pilate's space. Pilate's palace, his courtyard. You can look up maps on the internet. You can see there's been artist renditions. It's beautiful. Pilate in his glory. And Jesus said, my kingdom is not about this. You know, imagine that, you know, even the ledge in Winnipeg or the Parliament buildings or the big business building complexes where you go in and there's a water fountain and there's elevators and there's big things on the wall that list all the important people who are there and how to find them. And then there's other people who are so important their names aren't listed. Imagine one of those buildings, the pinnacle of power. And Jesus says, my kingdom is not about this. My kingdom is about the people who are sitting outside this building begging. That's who I'm about. And that is the resurrection, because all of us, our lives will pull us out of Pilate and into, in one way or another, into one kind or another of gutter. And that's where Jesus meets us. Here at the heart of the Christian year, in the 3 holy days and Good Friday. And Jesus dies and is buried with us in the worst day of our lives, the most painful memory. Jesus dies and is buried with the part of our soul that was destroyed and is raised again on Easter. All that was broken, all that was torn is brought back together in a new wholeness of Easter, of resurrection. That is the good news of the empty tomb. That is who we are as Christians. So let's celebrate that as we sing, Christ the Lord is risen today.